So the Division 2's raid has dropped. This is something that people have been really looking forward to. A lot of people wanted the Division 1 to have raids in it. They had incursions, which were kind of raid light, I guess. But we finally got a raid in the Division. I haven't actually played this, but I watched some footage of it, and boy, it looks really hard.
It looks really hard. I mean,
it is tough.
Console finally finished it. 36 hours.
That's nuts.
To finish the raid.
So,
the actual time that they were 36 hours.
So PC, when did PC finish it from when it launched?
About
5 hours.
So PC launches
5.
and console at the same time. PC gets it done in 5 hours, and console players took 36 hours. Why is this?
Yeah, it is so. I mean, obviously on console, there's a lot of there's a lot of very quick things you can do on PC. You know, macros and fast turning, and the way you can react to things is obviously a lot faster. So and as we'll kind of get onto in a minute, when it comes to some of the encounters, you need to have that reaction. But I think ultimately it's because the raid was tuned so high, and bear in mind, we're all familiar with raids. We're all familiar with, we all like that kind of difficult end game content, and I'm no stranger to sitting for hours and hours into raids. I mean, we've all done it with Destiny raids, right? But the difference with the Division 1, or at least from the way I see it, is that it's tuned for the top 0.01%. It is, because how because the one thing the Division's always had, right? It's always been a game where you can do a ton of great customization, but there's so many things. In some games it's all right, cool, you got to get the good weapon with a decent roll, and then you got to have hit the gear score. Whereas in Division, you got to hit the gear score. Then you've got gear mods, you got weapon mods, you got weapon rolls, you got gear rolls. There's so much min-maxing you can do that you can have two people at gear score 500, and it might as well be gear score 500 and gear score 600 because it's that different.
Mm-hmm.
We went in with I play Division a lot, but I didn't necessarily play it as much as, say, the team that did well first. And it's night and day looking at our footage side by side. It would take me 3 magazines to kill a trash mob, and they would kill it in 1. They'd just be bam, dead. Whereas I'm sitting there fighting like he's the boss.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw some people talking about how they spent, X amount of insane hours creating this build, and they have this build created, but it's actually kind of useless in the raid because it's so focused on DPS. So if you created another build that was very in-depth and worked very well, it just didn't work in the raid because you needed that really heavy DPS
Interesting.
build.
So what I heard was that with PC players, because of mouse and keyboard, you could kind of compensate for some of the issues with fast aiming that was requiring high DPS in the raid. So that was one of the differences between the PC clear versus console clear. On console, it's just you are inhibited on being able to correct for aim mishaps with DPS, and because it's so focused on DPS, the raid, that's why the console player base had a tough time clearing it faster.
Yeah, that adds up to me. I play that game on both keyboard and mouse and on a controller. When I'm sitting at my desk, I'll play on keyboard and mouse, but I'll also play it on that TV behind me, and I'll just put my feet up and play on a controller and just kind of wander around the world. But it's kind of stark, the difference between how good my aim is on the controller versus the mouse, because the recoil it's much harder to compensate for the recoil in that game specifically.
Yeah.
With that controller in my hand, the guns have a lot of kick, and especially at distance, which you want to be at, because the game is difficult. You do die quickly in that game. It can be hard to put that DPS down with a controller.
Yeah. So 2 things. One is I'm a little disappointed that it's so DPS focused. I mean, it makes sense for them trying to make an upper echelon, top tier type of experience. So I get that. But the fact, like you guys are talking about, there's so many builds in the game, but essentially if you don't go in there with a DPS focused build, you're going to struggle, right?
That's disappointing.
Yeah. I feel like there's because the thing is, there are some great aspects to it, but I feel like they are heavily overshadowed with that. One of the things that when going into the raid, or prior to the raid, I was the one thing that I hope they don't do, that they have typically always done in Division, is that in order to create difficulty, they do artificial difficulty. They just throw in a ton of difficult enemies, and then they just throw them at you, and that's invariably where you lose. And it's kind of a shame, because it's one of the things that, incursions, for example, I know they were never raids, but one of the things that incursions never really had, but they never really had hefty mechanics. There was invariably one thing you had to do, but one of the things that I remember speaking to the developers saying that I really want to see mechanics worked into Division raids, because, and while it's a lot easier to kind of pull something off crazy and say like a Destiny raid, because you can say, oh, this alien that's got 2 heads is going to come out of a wall and then you have to shoot its head. Whereas in a Clancy universe, it has to be more realistic. But it's kind of a shame because they work some mechanics into it, but the way that they structured it, I mean, to kind of sort of paint a picture for anyone like that maybe is watching that didn't even do it. So like, let's take the first encounter. First encounter, you're in a room. Right, and then there are 4 batteries that come out of the ground, and if any enemy, trash mob, or boss stand in the vicinity of these batteries, they're immune, which already is kind of an annoying mechanic. But then you can take down the batteries using 2 miniguns, so you can shoot them down, and once you've taken them down, provided you stay on top of it, there's consoles in the middle of the room, you can keep them down. So that's one thing you can stay on top of. Then the boss comes in, and the boss is like a big, heavy guy. He's got a backpack, and he's got a tiny window on his chest, and he has a healing mechanic. Now this is an annoying thing.
Interesting.
So you can't damage the boss until you drop him to his knees. You can only drop him to his knees when you shoot him with the minigun. And then the damage window is so incredibly small where, like, if, for example, you're reloading your gun, by the time you reloaded, he's got back up. So you've lost your damage window. Yeah. Then he's got, bear in mind, he's a very big armored guy who's got a tiny window on his chest.
He's a chungus.
Which then it glows orange. Basically is. Basically, right? And he's got like a tiny window on his chest. So when it goes orange, it says like he's about to start healing. So, but also for a massive guy, he runs like a flipping sprinter. So he sprints halfway across the room. You have to shoot this chest window to stop him from healing. And if you don't, he basically heals all the damage you've just done.
So in that very tiny window that you have.
Yeah, in that tiny window. And then that's exacerbated by the fact that there's a ton of ads that come in. And one of the things that kind of maybe I'm mistaken because it was kind of hectic. But one of the things that I've always appreciated about Destiny raids, they present a challenge, but they also have structured windows. It's like, all right, this is ad phase, deal with the ads. We're then going to move to boss DPS phase. We're then going to move to this mechanic. Whereas this was very much like, yo, the boss is moving. You got to stop him from healing. Oh, these enemies are coming in. Oh, the batteries are coming back up. Like, what the hell are we doing? And it also takes me 3 magazines to kill something.
Wow.
It's like, whew. So we got to the point where for us, I mean, I've spent hours and hours in Destiny raids, like going back to back, because I don't mind if I know that I'm losing because we're just learning mechanics and you're failing because you're like, oh, we didn't jump on that platform in time, but we know to do that next time. That I will spend hours doing. But we got to the point where the only way we would ever have got through that first encounter is if we had a flawless run. Like, we didn't miss a single shot. We got every single time. We didn't let him heal once. And we're like, you know what? There's not even any point. We've got a fully squadded team who are, we're all competent players, but it just, and I feel like the problem with that is it just overshadowed it, because if you just knocked it down just a little bit, right, made it so that it wasn't quite so, it's still challenging and you still had to manage those mechanics, but the enemies weren't quite so hard to take down, I feel like that would be a good balance, because then you would be able to appreciate the mechanics a little bit more. But right now it's just onslaught after onslaught, and it's just
sounds punishing.
It's basically like if you don't have the damage for those ads coming out, you have to play phenomenally to actually finish it.
I heard some complaints too that there was a game update that actually messed with a lot of people's builds, like right before the raid came out too.
Yeah, I think they normalized some of them because there was an ability to, or like a way you could roll slightly above the gear score before, and I think they normalized a lot of that, so some people's stats got a bit squashed. So yeah, and the thing is, well, it's kind of a shame because not only do you have this, but then also the raid itself already came out like a month after World Tier 5, so already it was later than people have wanted. So people's interest has started to wane already, and then you're presented with a situation where they were like, by the way, there's no matchmaking, which it sounded like they promised before. So you're now in a weird situation where it's like you've got to get 8 finally min-maxed teammates that can all communicate to get through this super tough encounter. The chances of anyone doing that is just like,
it is very slim, especially when you consider that there were people that made, they spent a lot of time in the division and they made a build, but they didn't focus on DPS, and they are essentially useless.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
And now they're like, oh, I got to go grind for another, 50 hours or however much to get this perfect DPS build to go try again.
That's rough. Yeah.
It is rough.
So what do you get if you complete the raid? Like what's the carrot?
There are three new gear sets that are in the raid, which have like raid focused perks, and they sound quite interesting. There is that unfortunate position again where like the gear sets, anything that isn't just like raw damage increase, a lot of people overlook them, but they're kind of these semi-interesting gear sets. So I guess if you have them, it'll make raid completion slightly easier. And there is also an exotic weapon. I think it's an exotic assault rifle. I think it's semi-decent, but it's one of those weird things where it's like, why are you going to put yourself through it? Because I don't think you really need that stuff, and there's nothing for you to do after that to use that stuff. So it's like,
That's a similar problem Destiny's always had, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The conundrum right there.
That's cool that there's 3 gear sets though.
Yeah.
So you can
the
only
loot
get those.
seems interesting.
You can only get those from the raid. Those 3 gear sets.
Yeah, because they'll be tied to projects which you can then unlock and craft when you're back, but then you get the parts from the raid, I believe. So yeah, and I mean it's the first time they've done gear sets like this because they've got each gear set has the way obviously the way that gear sets normally work is you have your 3-piece, 4-piece, 5 and 6-piece set bonuses, but on these ones specifically, the 5 and 6-piece set bonuses are also tied to specializations. So there'll be like one for the survivalist, one for the sharpshooter, one for the demolitionist, which is cool. So conceptually they're interesting. But again, unfortunately, when you look at, because gear set pieces also don't always come with the roles that you'll get on high end pieces. Right. So a lot of people that will look at these and be like, well, I just need a DPS build for the raid. They might not even consider using these. So yeah, it's that weird sort of balance point. And it is a shame because like I feel they've learned a lot from the stuff they kind of did in Division 1. I feel like they've put a lot of effort into this, but I do think that it's that difficult factor because now people have completed it. Like, if they tune it down and people afterwards are like, well, no, I completed the raid, and everyone will be like, well, you've done it now, it's easier. But I feel like they're going to have to do something like that because, I mean, to this date, I think I can probably still count on one hand how many teams have completed it, which is crazy.
Yeah. I think it's a shame to create something where it seems pretty cool. From what I was watching, the encounters seemed pretty interesting. Of course, it's not really my thing having real world stuff. I like fantastical things, so it's a little less interesting for me to watch. But watching it seemed like they had definitely put a lot of work into this, and the mechanics seemed pretty cool and all of that. But this is a tiny percent of the population that are going to be able to play it. If you have dedicated Division players who just happen to put time into the wrong build, they can't play it. And they've been playing, even if you played every single day, you have to go make another build.
That's really rough.
Do it.
And again, I think that was one of my main concerns about this when it was coming out, is that I was hoping that they were going to have a really good balance in there for builds. So so you have like maybe one DPS on each one of those teams. That's the focus DPS. Then you have like a couple supports and all that. Like, I was hoping that was going to be the case. And it seems like I guess they weren't able to figure out how to balance that. So it made it all DPS focused.
Yeah. It might be that they looked at their mechanics and they were like, well, maybe these aren't like complicated enough. So we need to just like, put in, again, it's that kind of artificial difficulty thing. But I feel like there's a couple of ways, if they didn't want to tune it down too much, there's a couple of things they could have done. Like, it's almost, for example, just the first encounter, like if you just took the healing mechanic out, that's almost like a heroic mechanic. That's kind of what you expect is like a hard mode version. That encounter in itself, there's still quite a few things to juggle. It's not hugely complex. It's not one of those kind of crazy like head scratching puzzles you spend ages solving like in a Destiny raid, but there's enough things to keep on top of that if you didn't have to worry about healing, then at least you can gradually chip down the boss. Because the other thing that I forgot to mention is that obviously the boss also, after X amount of cycles, the boss will destroy a minigun.
Yeah, he destroys a minigun.
If he destroys both of them, then that's also a wipe mechanic.
That's basically the rage mechanic.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's pretty tough. But yeah, and this thing, like I've never been, I'm no stranger to difficult content, and obviously I'm perfectly happy to accept that sometimes that things are too hard. But this is one of those ones where I'm like, no, this is tuned a little bit too high, because if it was one of those ones where, say, like on, I don't know, Last Wish, when the first day it came out and I was like, you know what, I guess
Uh-oh. Did we lose Eric's?
I think we might have.
lost
technical difficulties.
our friend.
Yeah. And our entire team is going to have to grind like that as well.
Hold on, Eric's. If you can,
sorry.
back up 1 minute, because there was some strange lag that happened, and we didn't hear.
Oh no!
We didn't hear about a minute.
We didn't lose you though, thank God.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Hey, I'm still here.
that.
Well, where I just seen it on the stream. That I'm putting a really interesting face. Where was it? Where was I? What was I on?
Talking about difficulty and the gear sets. And...
Oh yeah. So and that's the difference with when it comes to something like with Destiny, where if I kind of got to that point where I was like, you know what, my either we just can't get over this mechanic or something like that. You come back the next day and you think, all right, I can do this. Whereas with Division, I just know that in order to get this, every single one of us would literally have to finally min max. It just doesn't really seem to be like worth it, and that that extent, right? So I think they need to. I mean, yeah, it is true that the exotic weapon is good, but even if it is good, it's like, do I really want to go through all of this to get that one weapon? That maybe when they release the new expansion, maybe they'll nerf that weapon.
Oh
so,
boy!
So who knows, right?
Yeah.
So
I definitely see why they didn't include matchmaking if it's going to be this difficult, because that'd be extremely frustrating.
Well, I think that's the other thing.
Who don't even have mics on your team.
So
for sure, I totally understand why they don't have it, but I think that's another thing that kind of put a sour taste in people's mouth when it came to the raid releasing. It was delayed, and then they announced it with hardly any time to prepare for it. They had a patch right before the raid, so people couldn't even get into their character to get their builds ready before the raid launched. And then they're like, oh, there's no matchmaking, even though we said every single activity in Division will have matchmaking.
Yeah, that's really weird, honestly. Also, is there going to be a heroic version of this raid, or is this raid like that's where it's at? Anybody know?
I'm not too sure. I mean, they haven't said anything on that yet, but I mean, in like incursions in the past had different difficulties, but this is obviously a slightly different kind of thing. So yeah, no news on that right now.
Maybe they would do a thing where they would actually knock a bunch of stuff down into like a light version and then put matchmaking. So instead of adding heroic later on, maybe they're launching with the hardest difficulty and then adding a light version for people to be able to matchmake into that wouldn't have gear sets dropping. You know, so you learn the mechanics, but don't get punished so hard from not having like a completely maxed out DPS build.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Raids aren't easy.
No,
I think we've been spoiled. The Destiny community's been spoiled by some really fantastic raids, and you know, other games that kind of try to compete with Destiny. You know, it's one of the things that they have always been missing, and yeah, it's a tough thing. Definitely
Space aliens, magic dragons.
Yeah.